In the preamble to this talk, there's something in the brochure you have, which says, when the inner soul, or self, opens up to divine bliss, there is no way to explain it. When we ask the eternal questions, who am I? Why am I here? And really mean it from the depths of our being, the answer can only come from within. And once this happens, you will know. The all-knowing source of all that is will give you the answer. Our job then is to listen and respond. Okay, when I was asked last year by my dear friend, she's hiding her face over there, Maureen, would I be interested in giving a talk at this year's summer school? It took me one night to think it over and decide to say yes. And the title also came very easily. Since then, however, I have pondered much on how to approach this topic, and it has not been easy at all. And so I think it is best if I reflect back to when I first pondered all of this as a child. And I'm sure all of you did the same. So as far back as I can remember, I wondered, where had I come from? Whether I'd been here before, and if the universe went on forever, or was it inside a box? My parents weren't able to answer my questions. Neither were the rest of my family. And I remember very clearly one summer we used to have a caravan in Portainan on the Gower Peninsula. And it was my Uncle Jack, who wasn't really my uncle, but anyway, Uncle Jack, who was a scientist. And I remember very, very vividly asking Uncle Jack, what happens to us when we die? He looked at me very sternly and he said, nothing. We are just like cabbages in the ground. When we're finished, that's it. Somehow this didn't satisfy me. And so my quest to make sense of our existence began. And I think I was approximately 7 or 8 when I asked those first questions, but I'd been thinking before then. By the age of 11, I remember very, very clearly that I'd given up on the Christian church. And after returning from Sunday school, one Sunday afternoon, I announced to my parents that I wasn't going there again. And my father looked a little startled and put his Sunday paper down and looked with great interest, and he said, "Why?" And my response was, "They can't answer my questions. They're telling me that I simply have to believe it. Whatever's in the Bible, it's God's word, it's the truth. You are not to question it." And that made no sense to me at all. And it certainly insulted my intelligence. And so, I declared myself an atheist. And that is where I stayed until I was 18. At the age of 18, I met a remarkable RE teacher who guided me through A-level studies and introduced me to form criticism, a technique developed by a group of German biblical scholars shortly after the First World War. And other aspects of modern theology were also an eye-opener. My teacher caused outrage with the biblical literalists in my A-level study group. But for me, she was a breath of fresh air. suddenly I discovered there was another way of looking at sacred writings. A portal of light had been opened, and my interest was aroused. I went on to study theology, where I was given the opportunity of producing a dissertation on a world faith outside of the Abrahamic traditions. I chose Hinduism, and I was astonished with what I discovered. Another portal of understanding had opened up. Hinduism taught me that there is a divine spirit, an invisible force, which runs through everything and animates every aspect of life. Wow! It wasn't something out there and distant. It was right here, inside of me, inside of everyone, inside of everything. That absolutely blew me away. I thought that was incredible. The church had never taught me that. The concept of the divine spark, or the Atman, Jenny spoke of it this morning, being in everything that lives, fascinated me. The law of karma also attracted my interest, and I was intrigued with the possibility of reincarnation. Perhaps I had been here before, and maybe many times at that. Since those early days, I've explored many of the world's faiths in depth, and I've also spent valuable time on retreat or living with people of several spiritual traditions. What you learn from actual practitioners will always outweigh anything that has been written in books. Academic knowledge is one thing. Actual experience is another. There is also a world of difference between an inner experience and the information you will read in a book or hear from a teacher. Those of us who are searching for meaning to life, and I think all of us in this room are, or you wouldn't be here. So those of us who are searching are already exploring beyond surface reality, which many Eastern traditions call illusion, and what many of my Buddhist teachers called the apparent here and now. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? The apparent here and now. Think about that. But how? How does one actually awaken to the truth in the middle of ordinary life in this material dimension? Because this is where we are. How? How do we answer questions concerning the suffering of our chaotic world, which appears to be spiraling into escalating horrors without us falling into a pit of despair? What's the point? Somebody said the other day to me, the world is going to hell in a handcart. You look at the media and that's exactly what you think. Are things getting worse? We were talking about it this morning, Dino, weren't we? About the state of the world over breakfast. Don, you were there. Is it getting worse? Are things getting worse? Are we approaching what my Sufi friends call the end of days? In some respects, we appear to be living in degenerate times. That's a Buddhist expression, degeneration. Or, think about this, has the world ever been thus? History points the finger to past horrors that seem to repeat themselves. So is this the way it is? And if so, how do we cope with it all and survive? Existence in its multiplicity of manifestations can be both awe-inspiring and terrifying at the same time. Spiritual teachers of all traditions emphasize the importance of developing an inner state of stillness that can awaken us to the truth of who we really are and why we exist. Buddhists and Bon practitioners call this realizing or discovering one's own nature of the mind, or essence of one's awareness. They tell us that the mind has two aspects. One is the enlightened aspect, which is like pristine, clear light with complete virtuous qualities and has existed since beginningless time. Think about that. The other is contaminated, and if we are not vigilant, will drag us into the illusion, fear, and suffering of this material world. We all know that aspect too well, don't we? And I'm sure all of you will agree that our world needs healing. But to heal the conflict in the outer world, we have to heal it in ourselves first. But how do we find the doorway through this confusion, fear, and disconnectedness to find the exquisite beauty of our pristine minds? How? In order to achieve awareness of our mental radiance, the great teachers claim we need guidance and support on how to switch off from worldly activity so that we can find the truth of our essential nature and experience awakened consciousness. However, let there be a word of caution at this point. It is most important that we do not fall into the trap of chasing after false gurus or self-claimed avatars. There have been plenty of those around. Former devotees of, for example, Sai Baba, who was claimed to produce vibhuti or holy ash and conjure rings and medallions from thin air, they were shocked to their very core when the dark truths surrounding this claimed holy man were revealed. Sadly, Sai Baba was not the only charismatic leader with or without high occult abilities who has led people astray. Such characters have been around since the beginning of time, and no doubt will continue to exist and prey on the spiritual seeker or the vulnerable. Let us keep in mind that any so-called spiritual teacher who attempts to control your life or take your money should be avoided like the plague. Let a warning bell go off. Abuse of power has sadly been perpetuated throughout the ages in the name of spirituality and organized religions. There is also the danger of becoming a spiritual tourist, especially in this new age of spiritual exploration into all things both weird and wonderful. Without caution, our yearning for a sense of the sacred can lead us on time-wasting pilgrimages with the lost and the foolish. And I know some people who've been there. There is a spiritual vacuum at the heart of modern life, which has given birth to a yearning for mystery, transcendence, and meaning. There is a collective uncertainty, and organized religions as we have known them are being stripped down. People want spiritual truths that empower them and the community. Traditional institutions like the church are being challenged, and there is a yearning for a sense of the sacred. What the Benedictine monk Bede Griffiths described as a myth that will give meaning to our lives now that the myth of Western science has betrayed us. So how do we go about this? How do we go about finding this inner knowing that will lead us to a heightened or enlightened consciousness? This is unexplored territory for the vast majority of humans. Many people have reported that it is when we are right in the midst of suffering and finally surrender that we can experience a light bulb moment or a pointer to the truth. I remember, those of you who know me well know about this experience because I've told you about it. I remember, oh no, this is something else, sorry, I've jumped ahead. I remember having amazing discussions about God and the purpose of life with a Persian gentleman I often met in the mixed sauna of the Marriott Leisure Club, where I go for a swim on Friday afternoons. Now that sounds a bit saucy, doesn't it? I promise you it wasn't at all. It was all very kosher, I promise you. Okay, you're imagining all sorts now. Right, but coming back to that, really, over the years, the conversations that have gone on with people in the sauna have been amazing. And it is astonishing what people will share in the close, steamy space of a sauna. Perhaps it's the small womb-like safe space that encourages such discussions. Honestly, it is amazing, truly. Anyway, my friend always greeted me with a warm smile and a salam. He did not describe himself as a Muslim, but as a seeker of truth, and insisted that he was Persian and not Iranian. Very, very strict about that. To find God, he said, we have to surrender. It's the only way. Intellectual arrogance will get us nowhere. We must let go, stop struggling, and trust completely in the divine presence that is within us and around us. We have to surrender to it. It is always there. But most of us are so caught up in the craziness of this material world that we forget. We allow worry, anger, and fear to take over. If we could just step back for a moment, breathe, let go, God will always find us. By surrendering to the benevolence of the divine, we cut the cords of illusion. That's what he said. His words resonated with me and made sense. To act on his advice, however, is no easy thing. Most of us have spent too much of our lives worrying and stressing over something or someone. It's a bad habit that is not easy to break. To not worry and surrender instead takes a conscious effort. Learning how to meditate, be still, and focus on the breath helps. But this is also not easy, as the monkey mind is always ready to spring into action and distract us with its endless chattering. As a student, I was greatly impressed with the theological writings of the German-American Christian existentialist philosopher and Lutheran Protestant theologian, there's a mouthful, Paul Tillich. Many regard Tillich as one of the most influential theologians of the 20th century, and I tend to agree. Tillich called God the ground of being itself. He spoke about the ontological existence of God. Tillich felt that since one cannot deny that there is being, in other words, where we are and our world, where we exist, there is therefore a power of being. He saw God as the ground upon which all being exists. As such, God precedes being itself, and God is manifested in the structure of beings. Now, that's quite complicated, isn't it? So that is something to sit down and talk and debate and analyze. The mystics of all spiritual traditions speak of religious experience or communion with this ground of our being. And furthermore, they claim this may surprise and overwhelm us unawares at the most unexpected moments of aliveness or despair. When this happens, we experience a limitless belonging to an indescribable mystery of the ultimate. This was certainly my experience. At the age of 35, when my personal life was in shreds, and every day felt like being in a state of constant bereavement. It was a terrible time, filled with periods of depression, deep desperation, and no hope. I was in a mess. And I saw no way of how to move on. In my despair, I remember looking up at the sky one evening and saying, "And as for you," and by that, I suppose I meant God, "as for you, I don't think you care or are even there." That was daring, wasn't it? What happened approximately a fortnight later is something I will remember for the rest of my life. I returned home from work with a friend who went into the kitchen to make a cup of tea. I entered the lounge. I sat down for a moment on the sofa. Something possessed me to cross the room, look out of the window, across the garden, into the early evening sky. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't expecting anything. I remember the sky being pale blue with a few clouds. It was October. What happened next is almost impossible to describe or explain in any words that'll make any sense at all. I did not see anything with my eyes. I did not hear anything with my ears. However, I was suddenly surrounded and embraced in a divine energy of pure and profound love. Exquisitely gentle, yet awesomely powerful all at once. It was not of this world, and yet somehow it was, because it had reached out to me. I also received a message telepathically, which was impossible to translate accurately into any human language. But the essence of it was as follows: I am with you. I am always with you. You do not understand now, but one day you will. Everything that happens has a purpose, and everything matters. I stood in a state of stunned awe. My friend entered the room with the tea, took one look at me and asked, "What's happened to you?" I do not know what I looked like, but I must have looked different. I attempted to explain and describe what had taken place. Oh, my life didn't get any better, by the way. You've just got to get on with it. This experience left me with an unshakable knowing of the existence of the divine, its interconnectedness, and our ultimate belonging. I now had a little understanding of why the mystics of all traditions keep telling us that those who speak do not know. Those who know do not speak. This is the noble silence of the Buddha when he was asked if God existed. Language causes problems because it throws up concepts and abstractions that can be very different from the actual experience. And yet, we need the words of the mystics to help us explore ideas just long enough to help us reconnect with the source of all that is. All the religions of the world can be traced back to a mystical experience of communion with the divine or the ultimate by their founders. The paths and expressions of these faiths are diverse, but all are expressions of the same mystical core, a knowing of ultimate belonging. Belief systems or cosmologies are important because they can help us understand the universe and how it works. They also hold the culture of a people in place and give meaning to life. Ancient cultures and indigenous peoples, my friend over there knows about that, don't you, Scott? These peoples understand the inherent power of a society's belief system and mythology. In contrast, modern secular society has lost touch with how the cosmos works and has given birth to the arrogance that humans are the only life forms in the universe who possess consciousness. Not surprisingly, this has encouraged a feeling of isolation and separateness from the rest of creation. And sadly, it has also given birth to a brutal mistreatment and abuse of the natural world, which is heartbreaking. When Nietzsche said God was dead, He was actually pointing out that modern man no longer had a relationship with the universe or anything sacred. This disenchanted worldview has encouraged the mindset of so many world governments who are motivated by profit, greed, power, and control. The rise in aggressive capitalism is depressing to witness, especially when we learn that approximately 1% of the world population now owns almost 50% of the entire global wealth and is creating an inequality the like of which we have never seen before in human history. We have forgotten who we are. We have forgotten the sacred. And as a result, our society is sick. Our world is both physically and spiritually polluted. It is time to wake up, to look at our shadow sides head on. To do this, we need to face facts courageously and take responsibility. Perhaps we will then discover our primal power and our connection with this beautiful planet and all who share it. By doing this, we will be able to embrace the mysteries of our universe once again and find a way back to honoring the sacredness of all life. All. By fully entering the present moment, we can enter the infinity of time and space and draw our attention to any place or person on the planet that needs help. This is the power of prayer and sacred ritual, which can bring healing. Forgiveness and reconciliation is desperately needed in our modern world. This is vital if we are to stop repeating the dreadful traumas and mistakes of the past, and to release the negative energy of those acts that are holding us back from becoming a more compassionate world. To follow a spiritual path that will show us this wisdom, we need to understand the limits of a life that is focused on material concerns. A self that grasps at pleasures, possessions, accomplishments, fame, fortune, or even relationships is only temporarily satisfied. It will soon crave again. This pattern of attachment is seen as a fundamental mistake. And it takes us a long time to wake up to it. Maybe some of us at my age are beginning to realize that. Buddhists describe it as honey on the razor's edge. Think of that. We become codependent, imprisoned prisoners when we fail to connect with our inner spiritual power. Spirituality offers an alternative, a movement away from a focus on material concerns and towards a way of life that can avoid the suffering that may come from attempts to prop up or satisfy the ego. This requires a shift in orientation that will benefit both the seeker and everyone linked with that person. The opportunity for liberation, inner peace and harmony can become possible, and our existence in this world will start to be seen as a scintillating journey towards an awakened state. Each day presents new challenges and requires us to choose how we will respond. The goal is to train ourselves to become more self-aware, more accepting, and grateful for life, to be mindful of our thoughts and our actions and our words and their outcomes. In other words, to become more connected and aware. In the Theosophical Classic, all of you know it, those of you who are Theosophists, at the feet of the Master, Krishnamurti shares this message from his Master. In all the world, there are only two kinds of people: those who know and those who do not know. And this knowledge is the thing that matters. What religion a man holds to, what race he belongs to, these things are not important. The really important thing is this knowledge. The knowledge of God's plan for men. For God has a plan. And that plan is evolution. When once a man has seen that and really knows it, he cannot help working for it and making himself one with it, because it is so glorious, so beautiful. So because he knows he is on God's side, standing for good and resisting evil, he is working for evolution and not for selfishness. Makes sense to me. In the voice of the silence, and I believe Wayne here somewhere, Wayne, you are dealing with this profound stuff. In the voice of the silence, the paramitas speak of 7 portals that lead the aspirant across the waters to the other shore. That in northern Buddhism can be synonymous with reaching nirvana, whatever that is. Each portal has a golden key that opens its gate. And I will leave my friend over there to deal with them. Profound. But there's something else, and this is very important, and I'm sure all of you have experienced this. We are told not to give in to fear. Fear, O disciple, kills the will and stays all action. How many times have we felt afraid? No, I don't think I can do that. I am not capable of that. I am not good enough, or whatever. Fear destroys everything. Courage. Courage is needed. Courage. The ancient seers saw in consciousness a vehicle of deepening perception, leading them to see directly for themselves the eternal truths of the universe. HPB, for those who don't know what that's this amazing lady, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. I'm a great fan. Ever I discovered her, I am totally blown away and fascinated by this person. Wow. She makes it clear that unconditioned inquiry is the very life of theosophy as a timeless wisdom. She says, no vision of one adept was accepted until it was checked and confirmed by the visions, so obtained as to stand as independent evidence of their adepts, and by centuries of experiences. Let us contemplate that there is an ultimate reality that is unchanging, a reality that is immutable and eternal, whilst the external world is ephemeral and constantly changing. In his letter to the Corinthians, I'm not a great fan of St. Paul, but in his letter to Corinthians, and some of you know this well, he spoke of the gifts of the Holy Spirit because they'd been squabbling. Oh, you know, arrogance kicks in, doesn't it? I can do this. I have this gift. Or will I have that gift? Really? In this letter, he speaks of the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and he warned us that no matter what gifts we receive, and we've all got different talents, no matter what gifts we receive, if we do not have unconditional love and compassion, we are nothing but noisy gongs and clanging bells. We may have all knowledge and understand all secrets. We may have enough faith to move mountains, but if we do not have love, we are nothing. Love is patient and kind. It is not jealous or conceited or proud. It is not ill-mannered or selfish or irritable. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. It is not happy with evil, but is happy with the truth. Love never gives up. And its faith, hope, and patience never fail. Love is eternal. It is the greatest of all the spiritual gifts. Love, unconditional, loving kindness, compassion, love. Each morning, when we wake up, and sometimes I think, oh God, I'm here again. Maybe sometimes you feel like that. Oh. Each morning, when we wake up, we should try, even though some mornings it may be very hard, depending on what's going on in our lives. But each morning when we wake up, we should try to make a conscious effort to be grateful for our precious human life. And here's the big one. Surrender all fears. Surrender. Listen to the silence and become aware of the inner voice of wisdom. If we feel anxious, depressed, or uncomfortable about something, learn to sit. Breathe. And surrender. Surrender that feeling until it leaves. That's a good habit we must learn. We need to become conscious of how our minds work. Observe the thoughts and feelings as they arise without any distraction, and take speedy action when negativity enters in. Don't be distracted. Be aware of how your mind is working. And in this way, we will start to become empowered. Listen. Surrender. And feel the guidance that will come from within. And remember, nothing in our lives happens by chance. Karmic law tells us that. Nothing is by chance. Us meeting and being here is not by chance. The people we have met in our lives is not by chance. Nelson Mandela. We will all remember him and what he went through. Do you remember that when Nelson Mandela left prison, he read out a quote from a book by Marianne Williamson. The title of it is A Return to Love. This is what he read. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others. My friends, we have much work to do. Thank you for listening.